this video is on my personal experience, right? So I'm not going to be demonizing, the construct of masculinity. I'm not going to be trying to say that anything is negative, because it can't be inherently negative or positive. You know what I mean? It's just a construct that we as a society kind of agree to, right? And so the ways that we use this construct, or the ways that we kind of approach things in order to fulfill this construct, that's our responsibility. You know what I mean? But you can't say that masculinity or femininity is inherently good or bad, because technically we all don't even have the same idea of what masculinity and femininity is. So that's really what I'm going to be doing, is explaining my experience with the construct as a whole, and in a sense deconstructing my definition of it in my head, because I feel like, in a sense, my definition was bred out of a space of toxicity, in a sense, and not a sense of true growth and development. And of course, this is just going to be my personal experience as a masculine presenting person in America myself. So I feel like most people's first experience with masculinity and femininity is from their parental figures in their life, and I'm really no exception to that. I love my father down, but our relationship wasn't always the most steady, I'd say. While he was and still is in my life, I feel like, in a sense, his importance in my life was larger than my importance in his was, in a sense. But despite me growing from that now and kind of finding peace in our dynamic, in our relationship, even in the past, and of course forgiving for that, during the time of my upbringing, that really wasn't the best. Like, you can't really expect that out of a 5, 6, 7-year-old, you know what I mean, during their upbringing, asking where my father, now, as a child, I was instilled values of, integrity, honesty, consistency, things like that, but they were never really necessarily tied to manhood or how to be a man specifically. They were just tied to how to be a good person, and I appreciate that. You know what I mean? I wasn't really necessarily given a whole rule book on how to be a man, but instead I was kind of left to my own devices to kind of develop what I thought masculinity was supposed to be in my head. I started associating it with interest. I started associating with interest in sports, interest in cars, interest in women, a little dangerous. So when I would start getting into rooms with older men, and I'd always be asked if I was getting into sports or things like that, I always did kind of feel like I wasn't really doing the whole boy thing correctly, in a sense. So that kind of widened that distance between what I knew I liked and what I thought I was supposed to like. So I kind of started to see masculinity as this room that was locked behind this door that I didn't really have the key to, you know what I mean? And in a sense, it always made me feel a little bit off, a little bit wrong. And I started to kind of internalize that by, I wasn't really the most talkative child. I started to get more timid. I felt uncomfortable, in a sense, in with other boys my age, just because, like, it felt like we had nothing to relate to. And of course, while I did have friends and eventually did start, like, being in spaces to where it felt like there was other things that I could relate to people on, for example, like anime, like I was with those types of groups when I was in school and stuff like that. But when I was with family, or when I was hanging with my cousins or something like that, anytime the topic of sports came around, it just always kind of felt like, damn, I'm not doing something I'm supposed to. Like, I'm not there yet, if that makes sense. Not only that, but it was also this, like, attitude I was expected to exhibit, like this air of toughness, like, don't play with me type of aura that I would need to have. And I don't know, I really just didn't care about that, you know what I mean? Like, I just had this, I guess, radically optimistic view of people, like, let's all be friends, like, because I don't know, like, and I don't know, and even to this day, like, I don't think I've ever truly been in a fight, you know what I mean? I've gotten, like, picked on, but I picked on them back. Like, it wasn't no, like, I never needed to be violent with anybody, in a sense. Why is the lighting like just... So I never really had my own idea of what I thought masculinity was supposed to be, other than it being something that I guess I just, like, didn't have, you know what I mean? It wasn't until I started writing my journal where I started just, like, trying to go back to the time that I kind of started to get this resentment for masculinity. And instead of seeing it as, like, something I just wasn't a part of, seeing it as something that I had to actively, I guess, be against in a sense. And I thought back to this experience that I'd had with one of my father's friends, right? And so, well, to give context, every Sunday, me and my dad would go over to one of my dad's friend's house to watch the game. Over there, they'd watch the game, and I'd usually just go play with my cousins. You know, they're not really like my blood cousins, but like they's my cousins. Like, I promise you, like on everything, I promise you, they my cousins. So yeah, we would always be playing outside or something like that, and they would be inside watching the game, and every maybe hour or so they'd come outside to talk or smoke a cigarette or something like that. And it wasn't just my dad that would go to this house, it was also, you know, a bunch of my dad's friends, their kids, stuff like that. They'd always come around. And so there was this one friend of my father's, he's probably like 30 pushing 40 at this time, and every time he would see me, he'd come up and talk to me and dap me up. He would start like punching me in my chest, you know what I mean? Like not enough to like knock the wind out of me or anything like that, but like enough to like be like, dang, like, you know, you hitting me in my chest is annoying. And I'm like, what, 8 years old at this time. I remember he would walk up to me and just keep on going and going and going until like, I don't know, like I don't even know what would even prompt him to stop. I don't know if I'd run away or if he would just like get tired, but he would just keep on going. And it wasn't funny at this point. Like it was just like aggravating. And he would do this every time that he saw me. And I'm 8 years old. I'm thinking like I'm not supposed to be, you know, hitting on no adults or nothing like that or whatever. And it wasn't even like no play fighting situation in the first place. It was just like it felt like I was getting bullied by this grown man. And I'm not fighting back like you old enough to like break me into two pieces, you know what I mean? So it got so bad to the point where every time I would see him, I would start like running away or going, you know, getting out of his way so he didn't see me, going around a corner, running away, stuff like that, and just hiding, like, you know what I mean? And it's not like this wasn't in like broad daylight in front of everybody to see. Like I felt crazy. Like, why are y'all just letting this grown man hit on me? My dad is watching from the side or like not paying attention, and they talking with their friends, like nobody's like, I guess, helping me or whatever. And I just felt weird about the whole situation. Even when I went to go say something, they'd just be like, oh yeah, he's just playing, like just invalidating the whole little thing. And so I remember there was this one day in particular where he had pulled me from when I was playing with them, like literally pulled me to the side and started doing it and kept on punching me in my chest, hitting me. And I guess something about this time in particular, it had really got to me because I had just lost my composure and I just started like hitting him back, but not even just punching, like scratching him in his eyes to the point where he was like bleeding and stuff like that, and just like hitting him and tears just falling down my face and stuff like that. Like I'm just overly mad, and I just let the rage kind of just take over me and start hitting him back. Mind you, this is the 4th or 5th time that he's done this in the past couple of weeks. So after I get done punching him until I literally don't have any breath to punch him anymore, he finally like backs off of me. And that's when I finally get acknowledged from all the adults in the room that, you know, I'm over here being punched by this pushing 40-year-old man. And they start validating me, they start clapping, they start being like, that's my nephew, that's my son, whatever. And I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like, is this Hunger Games? Like am I in a medieval coliseum being forced to fight for sport? Like, what's going on over here? And I remember after that time, my dad took me to the side and he was like, that's right, you're supposed to defend yourself, you're not supposed to let nobody play with you like that. And I'm just like, huh? Like, I don't know, I'm just a little confused. Like, this was a whole lesson. Did y'all conspire on this? Was he sent to test me or something like that? Because I sure did fail like 3, 4, 5 times. But it also just weirded me out because that didn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't like that. That didn't feel like something that I was supposed to do. That man is so much older than me. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's not how you properly teach a lesson. And while today I do understand what they were trying to make me understand, not to let anybody, I guess, intimidate me or make me stand down or whatever, it's just like, is that the proper way to teach it? Like, that didn't feel good at all. I remember after he pulled me to the side and talked to me, my father, I just ran to the bathroom. I obviously locked the door and I just started crying. Like, it didn't feel good to lose myself. It didn't feel good to succumb to violence and rage. It didn't feel good to retaliate, to hurt somebody, even if it was this old man that I really didn't fuck with in the first place. I had never been taught to fight fire with fire. I had never been taught that was the solution to anything. I was taught that violence breeds more violence. So it took a little time in my head to deconstruct the notion that masculinity was this kind of act now, think later, barbaric system where I'm just supposed to allow myself to be overcome with rage. I didn't appreciate being applauded for acting on whim or being violent. I felt like the men in my area, in my space, were supposed to stand up and kind of help me and defend me. And so that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because it felt like if my mom was there, she wouldn't let this happen. You know what I mean? Like, and of course it is important to be able to stand up for yourself, but at the same time, first of all, like, you're 40, you know what I mean? I'm 8 years old, you know what I mean? You're a grown adult in my face acting like unreasonable. And so that just kind of, I guess, warped my view on what I thought masculinity was and what I thought I was supposed to seek from it. And like I said, this is just my experience with everything. So as kind of like a silver lining for this video, I'm gonna kind of highlight what I've learned and what I've implemented from what I think masculinity is supposed to be into my life. So I think of everything on an energetic level, right? And so energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be repurposed. You know what I mean? And so because of that, I feel like everything kind of needs to have a balance in your life. And so I don't need to put any sort of value over masculinity or femininity. I kind of need to find out where I myself stand in that dichotomy, if that makes sense. I feel like me seeking masculinity is me trying to heal the part of me that would go and be introduced to older male, I guess, family members. I feel like I'm trying to undisappoint that part of those men that I disappointed so long ago by not fucking playing football. You know what I mean? And that's not realistic, first of all, because you cannot please everybody, right? I don't need to change myself or try to act a certain way because I want some random person who probably isn't going to add anything to my life to accept me. You know what I mean? Another issue with that is that masculinity has a different definition for everybody. You know what I mean? So while I said as a child, my definition of masculinity was interest in sports, interest in women in cars, like, that has changed for me over the past few years. For me to be able to grow and accept myself, it could have changed with them too. Some people see masculinity as dominance. Some people see masculinity as anger. You know what I mean? We don't all have the same kind of perspective on this one little thing. We can't all agree to what it means. So why would I try and sit here and reach this goalpost for people outside of myself when the goalpost isn't even in the same place for everybody? You know, I feel like this is very prominent in queer male spaces, specifically like Black queer male spaces, because there's this very clear ideal of what a Black man is supposed to be, right? And part of that ideal is heterosexuality. Like it or not, believe it or not, you know what I mean? Being a Black male growing up queer is being a Black male growing up outside of the traditional views of what you are supposed to be, right? So if I'm already a failure in the framework of what a Black male is supposed to be in a lot of people's eyes, in the eyes of people who I probably look up to, the eyes of people who I wanted validation from, then I can't exist inside that framework. I have to exist within a framework that I make for myself, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a failure. You know what I mean? I'm not a failure, and I have to be secure within myself to know that, and I have to be secure enough to make a framework that exists for me, because obviously the one that we have is not one size fits all, and it damn sure doesn't fit me. So I have to create and embody the archetype of the man that I want to be. I can't use anybody else's framework or anybody else's blueprint to become the man that I want to be, because the man I want to be can't possibly be the man that everybody else wants me to be. I have to be who I want to be, and I have to know why I want to be that way. And so my idea of masculinity is not going to be the same as your idea of masculinity. My idea of femininity is not going to be the same as your idea of femininity. So my goal is to embody the masculinity that I want to be. I want to be the type of person who would have been able to talk to little me and be like, hey, these things that you're seeing aren't applicable to everybody. You know what I mean? And you don't have to act a certain type of way in order to elicit a response from somebody or to get somebody else to like you. That's not sustainable. You can be secure within yourself. You can be secure within your beliefs and the way that you act, and know that that is okay and that is enough. And that you don't have to act like you like certain things or be this certain type of like violent macho man. That's not the solution to your problems, and this is not a realistic way to move about life. And violence and abuse isn't a way to teach somebody a lesson in any way, shape, or form. And that is not okay, especially to a child. As Black men, we have to stop seeing violence as a solution to violence. You can't beat any ideas into people's heads. You can't love somebody through harming them. You can't expect change from retaliation. You know what I mean? I also try to take into context, you know, my dad grew up in a different area than me. You know, I grew up in A-Leaf, which like isn't obviously the nicest place, but it's definitely not Section 8 where my dad grew up. Not the same, you know what I mean? I have to take into context that they did grow up in places where it probably was necessary to fight at times. But I can't let that define me. I can't let those circumstances make their way into my ideologies and the way that I go about things today. And so while I acknowledge that that was something important that they probably wish that they knew from their fathers or something like that, or they're probably happy that their fathers taught them, you know what I mean? I have to take everything with context to the person that I want to be. And the person that I want to be does not want to recreate those cycles of violence. The person that I want to be is someone that changes things for the better, hopefully, and enacts change in a meaningful way. A way that doesn't just turn the gun to the other side and tell them to see how they like it, you know what I mean? But I just said all that to see if there was anybody who could relate to what I had to say. And if y'all in any way, shape, or form kind of had to go through the experience of defining masculinity for yourself, please feel free to share your stories in the comments. This was a little bit difficult for me. I kind of had to go back into things that I just kind of intentionally hid from myself or intentionally buried deep down so I wouldn't have to kind of deal with again. But I'm happy I did, because it definitely put a lot of things into perspective for me.